And so there are different themes in the book that deal with all this phenomena. I will just mention a few of them, just to raise your interest. For example, the whole theology of land issue. I have one chapter on that. But if you want more, you have to read Justice and Only Justice, my first book. And there are other articles that I have written over the years on the whole question of theology of land. Because as I mentioned to you, it is basic. You know, the Bible is a big book. You can come up with a very exclusive theology of land. But you can also find an inclusive theology of land in the Bible, including in our Old Testament or in the Hebrew Scriptures. So, not only that I can prove in inclusive theology of land by reading the New Testament, I can also prove it by reading certain parts of the Old Testament. And I think that's very important, because this means that Jews also can claim that heritage, because it is also part of their heritage. So this is very important. But then, I look at Jonah. I wish we have time to look at Jonah. I have read what Old Testament scholars have written on Jonah, but because I'm a Palestinian, I have fallen in love with Jonah in a different way than Old Testament scholars have done. And for me, Jonah has become the first Palestinian liberation theologian. The story is unbelievable because what Jonah is doing, he's critiquing the theology of his day. And he's critiquing three different theologies. He's critiquing a narrow, exclusive theology of God in this beautiful story of Jonah. He's critiquing a narrow theology of the people of God, because God is interested in the Assyrians, the most staunch enemy of Israel, because the Assyrians destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. And he's critiquing a narrow theology of the land. God is not only bound to the land of Israel, God was interested in Iraq, where the Assyrians were living. It's a beautiful story written by a genius, maybe a woman theologian, unbelievable. A great story that I have fallen in love with it, and I'm so glad we have one of our greatest Old Testament scholars sitting right here in front, and I would love to see his reaction to the way we are reading now the book of Jonah. But there are other things. And every one of those chapters have to do with Palestine and Israel. So it is not like, I'm just enjoying reflecting on some of these texts. No, I am also reflecting on these texts because they have something to help us, to tell us about what's really happening back home. So I would say, another one chapter, for example, about Son of David or Suffering Servant. This chapter judges us as Christians. We're judged by it because we combine, the early church combined the two concepts of Son of David with Suffering Servant. But then at one point in history, we rejected, we put aside the whole concept of the suffering servant, and we just picked up the Son of David's strand, which, in my opinion, is the violent strand, because David was a conqueror. He was a military general. And Son of David, although it has a wonderful background to it in the Old Testament, but I believe that for us Christians, for empire, now we started using the Son of David. We justified wars, we justified killing people in the name of the Bible. It's unbelievable what we've done. So then I believe that that has implications to the problems back home, and so I deal with it. And there are others. I cannot go through all of those chapters, but let me, for example, say I have a chapter here on Samson. Everywhere I go, people want to know about suicide bombings. So I have a chapter that Samson was the first suicide bomber. Now, how do I explain this? I try to go into some details, and I give a theology, a Christian theology, that responds to suicide bombings. And I believe, again, for us Christians, it's important to do this. I deal at the end, there are other chapters on the Bible and theology. Let me just mention one more. And that has to do with Jerusalem. There is no way of arriving at peace back home if we don't have a resolution of Jerusalem itself. What do we do with Jerusalem? Now, I did emphasize in the book that writing this book does not mean that I want the conflict back home to be resolved on the basis of the Bible. No. We interpret the Bible in so many different ways, it will not work. We want to resolve the conflict on the basis of international law. That is one basis that I hope everyone else will accept. But the Bible can also inspire us. If we have the glasses of justice on, it can inspire us. So whose Jerusalem? I pick up 4 texts from the Bible, 2 from the Old Testament, 2 from the New. And I try to give an interpretation of those texts. There is one of them from at the end of Nehemiah that is atrocious. I hope none of us will accept it. But then there is Psalm 87 that all of us can embrace. God is pictured standing on the gate of Jerusalem, welcoming people into the city. And God says, all of you Assyrians, you Babylonians, you Egyptians, most of those enemies of ancient Israel, welcome. All of you are born here in the city. Jerusalem belongs to all of you. Let's dance. Let's enjoy it. Unbelievable Psalm 87. If you just read it, like when I first read it, you're not going to understand it. It's not written very well. You need a commentary. You don't need a commentary, just read this book. I try to really help people, capture the power of Psalm 87.